capabilities? Yeah, okay. Perfect. Okay, are we recording? Does it say that we're recording?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, it's recording.
Okay. Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming to our Intro to Moot workshop. We have put together a brief PowerPoint to kind of go into the fundamentals. We had approximately 80 people actually register for this event, so it's great to know that there are people who are interested in mooting. You guys had lots of questions in the registration form, so we've kind of done our best to answer them in the PowerPoint. But once we're done the PowerPoint, we will go through an open Q&A to answer any specific questions that people have. And feel free to also message to write them in the chat because I'm sure people might know the answer and you'll get kind of a quicker response during the presentation. Next slide, Maria. Okay, so we're going to go through what is a moot court structure, the benefits of mooting, tips for success, and then FAQs, and then we'll have our open Q&A. So to begin, Lions Cup was founded by Fallon Burns and Jen Loristani. Jen is still actively involved in the Moot community. She runs Osgood Cup yearly. She's very well known. She's now a Crown attorney at the Ministry of the Attorney General. We have been operating for 8 years, which seems like a long time, but we only host a competition once every year, so it does seem to fly by. We have people who come from different colleges and universities across Canada. Oftentimes, we have a lot of people from Calgary who come. So we are a national moot court competition. So anybody is able to compete, as well as grade 12 students who are entering into university. Because it's a summer competition, they are able to compete as well. So the team will each give a brief introduction of themselves, and then we will get right into the fundamentals of mooting. So my name, oh, Oh, my name is Cassandra. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Lions Cup. This is my second year being involved as a steering committee member with Lions Cup specifically. I am a graduate of the paralegal program and currently a JD applicant as well. I go to York University. So I am super, super excited to have a moot competition this year again. Our goal is to make it accessible for everybody, affordable, and make some major changes in the moot community. I have been mooting since I started college, so I've been involved for a few years now.
Hey everyone, my name's Inni. I assume everyone can hear me. So I'm your Chief Operations Officer, and I've been part of Lions Cup for the past 3 years. I've competed over the last 3 years, so since 2021, 2022. So Lions Cup was my first ever moot, and I fell in love with moot ever since Lions Cup. So I've done Lions Cup for 3 years, and I'm excited to be part of the team that's bringing Lions Cup to each and every one of you. So my job is to make sure that the competition runs smoothly, so overseeing a lot of the operation stuff. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them to the best of my abilities.
Hello, everybody. My name is Hamza Talib. I'm the Assistant Operations Officer, so I will be assisting in a lot of the day-to-day operations of the competition. I also had the privilege of being present while Cassandra was um, judging previous moots in the past, so I do have some experience on how moots work. And I'm also a JD applicant, also go to York University in the Law and Society program. And I'm really, really excited and I'm really happy to be a part of the team that's going to make this competition one to definitely remember.
Hello, everyone. So this is my teammate or
department lead Elijah. He is the Lions Cup 2025 Chief Information Officer. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it today. However, Maria, if you could just switch the slide. Um, I was able to make it. My name is Gianfranco Caracciolo. I'm his assistant information officer. This is my first year with the Lions Cup. With that, I'm a first year law society student at York. As it has been my first year on the Lions Cup, it's been my first experience with mooting. However, the last couple of months has been very enjoyable, and I've had a lot of opportunities to grow and understand and learn mooting. Um, and I'm really excited to bring it to you guys. My job is basically to ensure that you and your partners get to your courtrooms where you guys will be speaking properly, ensuring that you're partnered up with a different team to go against, and that you make it there all on time and everything like that. Basically making your day as smooth as possible. So yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria. I'm your Chief Logistics Officer. I'm currently a student at Humber in the Bachelor of Paralegal Studies program. I'm in my fourth year, so I'm also a JD applicant. And I am your Chief Logistics Officer, so my role involves overseeing the planning, coordination, and execution of the logistical aspects of the competition. And I've been mooting for the past 2 years, and I've competed at Lions last year, and it was one of my favorite mooting memories. So yeah, I'm excited to join everyone to make this one memorable. And Shania, she is not able to make it today, but she is our Assistant Logistics Officer. She is a student at Centennial College, and she will help me fulfill my role to make this competition seamless for everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Rayanne. I am your Chief Financial Officer. This is my first year with Lions Cup, which also means this is my first year mooting. I am a JD applicant, but I am studying International Development Studies. And yeah, you guys.
Okay, so now to kind of get into everything. So I'm assuming everyone is here because they either have mooted before, they want to get better at mooting, or they have no idea what it is and they kind of just want to learn about it. So mooting is a simulated court proceeding where participants argue a legal case. Typically, this is a Supreme Court of Canada case, and most moots do constitutional law or criminal law. However, you could have various moots to do tort law, employment law, immigration law. It's kind of, you could really do any type of law in a moot. And it primarily focuses on legal research, writing, and your oral advocacy. And it involves appellate level issues. So you're reviewing facts of law, you're not admitting evidence or kind of doing that groundwork that a trial typically does. And mooting really helps you think critically. It helps you understand legal reasoning. And I can't stress this enough. It really helps your public speaking abilities just by going through all of the cases and then presenting in front of sometimes three judges. And typically in the final round, you'll have at least nine judges present.
All right, so fundamental to the structure of a moot is your understanding of how a moot functions. A moot is made up of two parties primarily. The first party are those that are called the appellant. So the job of the appellant is to bring forth an argument to the court on why the court should either overturn or modify a lower court's decision. So the word appellant actually comes from the word appeal. And so that's why mooting is called appellate level advocacy, because it's advocacy that occurs at the appeals level. So the appellants are the parties that are saying, we don't like the decision of this court. We're asking you to overturn it. In response to that, then you have the party called the respondents. The job of the respondent is to support the lower court's decision and essentially argue against the appellant's arguments. The respondent asks the court to maintain the decision of the lower court because usually that court's ruling was in favor of the respondent. And so the beauty of Moot, I would say, lies in its simplicity. You have two parties that often have interests that go against each other, and they just focus on presenting the best legal arguments that relate to the facts before a panel of judges.
Now, understanding the parties in mooting is very important. What's even more important is actually understanding the structure and the format of how it kind of all works. So here we have everything listed. The teams, it's usually two speakers per team, the appellant and respondent, as previously described. The time in which you get to speak during your turn is each speaker will have about 7 to 10 minutes on day one. However, on day two, the time may vary for the quarterfinals, semifinals, and the finals to reflect the advancing stages of the competition. The actual structure of how a moot or like your decision would go is that you would go through the introduction. You'd go through your roadmap, which is basically just outlining your arguments, just the bulk of the argument. Your submission, your core legal arguments, the relief sought, so what the team is asking the court to decide. So if they're asking to go in favor of a certain decision, how long they're looking for, like the sentence, that kind of thing. The rounds themselves is a team presents their case with the appellant going first. The respondents address the appellant's submissions and defend the lower court's decision. And then judges get to ask questions throughout. And then you have about 1 to 2 minutes to reply to the judges.
Okay, so there are plenty of benefits of mooting. Mooting can help you develop strong legal research, writing, and advocacy skills for future legal careers. You would be able to build confidence in oral advocacy that will help you to develop the ability to think on your feet and articulate arguments clearly. Um, so like that, you'd be able to like present arguments confidently and persuasively, and you'd be able to respond questions and challenge from judges and opponents, and you can think critically and respond quickly to unexpected questions. Um, it encourages you to um, construct persuasive arguments. So, like this, you would learn to analyze complex legal problems and identify key issues. You would evaluate evidence and develop well-supported arguments. It also promotes working effectively with your co-counsel, which will help you to communicate clearly and effectively. It will help you divide efficiently and work together to build strong arguments. And yeah, all that leaves out, it helps you with networking opportunities. That's my favorite, because it provides you the opportunity to connect with judges and lawyers and peers, which will ultimately help you build relationships and networks within the legal profession. In terms of practical experience, mooting offers practical experience in a simulated courtroom environment that will help you develop essential skills in a real world settings. So like this, you'd be able to gain insight into courtroom procedures and etiquette, legal reasoning and argumentations, and the dynamic of a courtroom and the roles of judges and lawyers and witnesses.
Okay, so some tips for success in moving. So I think the most important thing is to cover your bases. So that would be to know the case, master the facts, the legal issues, the precedents, and be ready for judge questions. And anticipating judge questions can be a little bit difficult because you can't really enter somebody else's mind, but just making sure that all the background information is covered so that when the judges do ask their questions, you know how to maneuver and what exactly to say to solidify yourself in the case. And that comes with strong legal research, so supporting support submissions with solid case law and anticipate counter arguments. A lot of it is anticipation. You're anticipating the judge's questions, and you're anticipating your friend's counter arguments. Clear structure, present submissions logically with a strong introduction, roadmap, conclusion. A lot of mooters, first time mooters, make the mistake of forgetting the roadmap, and the roadmap is a very essential part in constructing your argument. Practice oral advocacy, speak clearly, stay persuasive, manage your time effectively, take your time, speak slowly and clearly. Don't draw it out, but just make sure that you're enunciating properly. You're taking deep breaths, making sure that every word you say, you're saying it with intention and that the judges can hear you. Um, and stay composed, handle interruptions confidently, respond consistently and concisely to questions, and just make sure that don't get into your head about it too much. You're there, take a deep breath, and you know your stuff, you know your material, so deliver it in a way that will speak to the judges. Um, team coordination, work seamlessly with co-counsel to avoid repetition and reinforce key points. And professional etiquette for sure. Address judges properly, maintain eye contact, and stay poised. Remember that there is specific terminology to be used when you are addressing injustices. There is terminology to be used in general, so make sure that you're aware of that and make sure that you are not being too casual or misusing some of the terminology that you're supposed to know and supposed to have down. Adaptability, adjust submissions as needed based on questions and on your friend's points. Nothing ever goes 100% to plan, and mooting is exact manifestation of this. And just make sure that you have your plan, but you are also able to adjust and adapt the plan based on what you and your team needs in that exact moment. Time management, prioritize key points and stick to the allocated time. Seek feedback. Is really, really important to seek feedback so you can analyze your performance for each round. And if you move on to the next day, which hopefully you will show the judges that you have improved, and you'll show judges that you have, you've taken all of their advice and you've taken all their points, and now you can show them how much better you can do, and that will speak a lot to your performance.
So, mooting has its own vocabulary and its very specific etiquette. And by showing that you are familiar with those, it will make a big kind of statement that you are a good mooter and that you are thoughtful about your interactions with the bench and with your friends in the room. So when you're referring to judges, you should address them respectfully as justices or collectively as the bench when you're referring to all of them. And when you're referring to opposing counsel, always use the term my friends to maintain a professional and collegial tone. Usually we refrain from using opposing counsel or the opposing party because it's an activity where no one is opposing anyone. Everyone's there to help the judges make a decision. And when you're referring to your partner in your own team, you usually use the term my co-counsel instead of their actual name or any other informal references. So when you are framing your argument or when you are defending your point, you should never present an argument as a personal opinion or a submission, rather, as a personal opinion. You should always phrase it as a submission, such as the appellant submits, and never the I feel or the appellant feels or I think or I believe, because you are expected to have prepared and done research and you're representing your client. So feeling and thinking and believing is very good in other exercises. In mooting, you should be defending your client's point. So the courtroom demeanor, it's very conversational. You should engage in a conversation with the bench. You should avoid talking back or interrupting. You should stay composed and respectful at all times. Judges will interrupt your submission, ask you questions, multiple questions. So you should maintain yourself calm and address it as though you were talking to your friend outside, although very more professionally, but it's not kind of a presentation with no one to interact with. And then when you're requesting extra time, you should politely state, Justice, I see that my time is elapsing. May I have a brief indulgence to conclude? You may want to maybe specify 30 seconds, a minute, especially when justices ask you questions at the end of your submission. It's important to be aware of your time and make them know that you're aware of your time. And then finally, for the presentation skills, it's important that you maintain eye contact, that you avoid reading directly from your script. So you ensure that you're engaged with the bench, that they understand what you're putting forward, and that it maintains professional environment. So there are many other things, but these are the basics that if you do, everyone will think you're a seasoned mooter.
All right, so I have the privilege of going over some frequently asked questions. And the first one is, what qualities make a successful mooter? So there are a lot of qualities that I can touch on, but thinking about this question, the first thing that I would say definitely is someone that is able to read cases and extract the substance of the case. So a lot of mooting cases tend to be quite long. And by long, I mean that they can range from around 200 to maybe like 300 paragraphs. Some of them can be slightly shorter, but it does take some time to read cases. You have to quickly learn how to go through these cases, extract what you need to extract, and leave the rest alone. Not that you toss it out, but that you need to know how to focus on what's important. So that's the substance of mooting. You need to understand the facts of the case and the law and the reasoning behind the case. So I would say that's the first quality. The second quality would be confidence. If you're a mooter, one of the things that you need to exemplify is confidence. I won't be persuaded by your arguments if you're not persuaded by your own arguments. And so when you walk into a courtroom and you're presenting before justices, you need to be thoroughly convinced of your own arguments before you even present them. And the only way that that will work is if you've practiced enough. So your ability to communicate and persuade justices is definitely important to be a good mooter. And another one that a lot of people overlook, I would say, is being a good teammate. Though you are going up against, your opposing counsel, the appellant or the respondent, you still have to understand that mooting, especially in the underground arena, is a collegial activity, right? You will make a lot of friends through mooting. In fact, a lot of us on the executive board are friends through mooting. And so being able to communicate and recognizing that though you're going up against each other, that you can do so in a respectful manner is definitely something that is really important. So now I'll move on to the second question, which is that what are the differences between submissions made by yourself and your co-counsel? So I would say that definitely the division of labor is made usually before the moot. So please, if you're going into a moot, make sure that you and your co-counsel know who's going to be addressing what. Usually there are around 2 issues in a case. Sometimes it's more than 2, maybe 3 or 4. Rarely it's 1 issue, but usually there are multiple issues in a case. It is then your decision to divide up that load with your partner and decide who's going to be tackling what issue. Sometimes you can have one person deal with, if there's only 1 issue, you can have your partner or yourself deal with the issues, and then you can have someone submit on policy questions. But usually the division should be done before the moot. The third question is, what is the best way to research and prepare for a moot? You have to get your hands dirty. There is no way around it. You have to delve into the case itself. You have to read it because you have to understand that your opposing counsel and people you'll be going up against will have read this case. And so though if it's your first moot, you might be looking at a case and you might think it's daunting. I would say that there are a lot of resources out there breaking down the case. So if it's your first ever moot and the case has been released and you search it up and you're like, this is 60 pages, this is 90 pages, I'm really overwhelmed. The first thing I would do is just search up the case and put summary. There are tons of websites run by lawyers, paralegals, law school students, law firms. There are tons of websites that will often give you summaries. And if you read a short summary, that will take only about 2-3 minutes. If you read a short summary, that will give you insight into what the substance of the case is about. That way, when you start to read the case, you know and you have a roadmap in the back of your mind. As Lions Cup Moot, we're also hoping to have lots of sessions to basically show you how to work through cases. So definitely that's not something you need to worry about. I would also say that you have to familiarize yourself with the legal reasoning in the case. And so Cases can be broken down into understanding the facts of the case and the legal reasoning. Usually, the facts of the case are more persuasive at the trial court level. The trial judge is usually the one that hears the facts of the case and makes findings of fact. When we come to the appellate level, right, when you're at the Supreme Court level or the Court of Appeals, yes, the facts are still important, but what's important is the application of the law, right? So we're talking about how the law should be applied to the facts of the case. So you need to know what the facts of the case are, but you also need to know what the legal reasoning behind the application of the law is so that you can make submissions regarding what you think the Supreme Court should apply in terms of the legal reasoning. And so I would say that definitely look at the trial court decisions, the Court of Appeal decisions, and also the final thing I will say is that you need to practice over and over. There is nothing that is more beneficial to you as a future mooter than practice. When I've done moots with my friends, oftentimes we would practice for maybe like 3 hours, on certain days. I'm not saying that you'll practice for 3 hours every single day, but I'm saying that the first time you present your argument should not be in front of the justice on the day of the competition, right? You never want to dry run. We call it dry run. You never want to dry run your arguments if you haven't run them before. What practice allows you to do is recognize the most important thing, which is you are going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. I've been mooting for over 3 years. I've been doing oral advocacy stuff, mock trial for over 5 years now. I still continue to make mistakes. Some of the best mooters I know continue to make mistakes. The first thing you need to recognize is that you will make mistakes and you want to make those mistakes in front of your co-counsel and your friends rather than to make it in front of the justices, because a lot of mistakes you'll make are mistakes that you can quickly fix. So I would say that if there's anything you take away from this, just know that mooting requires you to, sit down and read the case and understand it. And mooting also requires you to practice and just be ready for that kind of commitment. I'm moving on to the fourth question. What is the average length of a submission? This will depend on the competition itself. I've seen it range from 5 minutes, 7 minutes. I've done a moot that was a 15-minute submission for myself. So all in all, my co-counsel and I had 15 minutes each. So 30 minutes with the other side, that's another 30 minutes. So it would be about an hour of submissions purely. But usually most moots will be in the 7 to 10 minute range with the average of 7 to 8 minutes. So that's what you should expect to be able to speak for around 7 to 8 minutes. I'm going to the second last question. How to stay confident throughout the experience. So this ties back to what I was just talking about with regards to the fact that you just need to accept that you will make mistakes. If you go into this and you think that you won't make mistakes or you berate yourself for making mistakes, then the process is going to be harder than it has to be. You're going to have slips of the tongue. You're going to get questions that you don't understand, and that is okay. And that is okay completely. What you do need to know is that when you make mistakes, there's no mistake that you can't recover from. I've made significant mistakes during mooting rounds that I've gone on to win simply because I was able to compose myself. So I would say that the first thing to know is that you will make mistakes and you need to focus on getting better and learning from those mistakes. And once you make a mistake, take the time to compose yourself and move on with your submissions. And it's funny, I'll give you just this little kind of quotation. A lot of people don't know this, but judges will actually tell you behind the scenes that sometimes when you make what you know is a mistake, the judges themselves don't even recognize it. So make sure you're not drawing attention unnecessarily to your mistake. If you accidentally say something wrong, correct yourself and move on. Okay. So definitely practice and make sure that you are just aware that you can learn from your mistakes. The last one is a really fantastic question, and I love that it's the last one. What do I do when I lose track of what I am saying? The best way that I would want to approach this is to even tell you how to avoid making this mistake as much as possible. So how do you avoid losing track of what you're saying? It's simple. Take a breath. Pause. Think before you speak. A lot of people, when they start mooting, they think that you must be ready to answer as soon as a justice stops talking. And that's incorrect. One of the mistakes that a lot of first-time mooters make is that they start speaking immediately and then they realize that they don't actually know where they're going. And so they just start stringing different words together and then they get nowhere. And that wastes your time and also shows to the judges that you're not really sure of where you're going. So compose yourself when you get a question, take a breath, take a pause, make sure you know what is going to come out of your mouth next before you start talking. And let's say that, you know, you're halfway through and you're like, okay, I'm really not sure what I'm talking about. One of the tips that we like to teach people is, you know, usually we encourage people to take up a bottle of water. Just take a sip of water, right? It's a natural movement that allows you to compose yourself and gives you time to think. So take a sip of water, take a breath, and continue with your submissions. And so those are some of the FAQs that we've had, but we're also going to have some questions that will come up later.
Okay, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to you could raise your hand. If no one's speaking, you can turn off your mic and ask a question. We did have one in the chat. There is a student in the paralegal program at CDI College. Do you think, from your experience, mooting had a greater beneficial impact than you initially thought on your personal or career life? Um, I guess I could answer this first, I guess. So I started mooting in college, and it all started because I had a professor who asked me to do an assignment on mooting. And the first competition I ever saw was the Ames Moot Court at Harvard. And it was the student who had passed out in the middle of her submissions, and then she got back up and continued her submissions just after passing out. Um, to me, that's what kind of like I wanted to get into mooting. It changed my life drastically. I don't think that I would have the community or the friendships that I do now had it not been for mooting. And I think just in general, like it's given me the ability to advocate for myself in ways that I never thought that I could. It went from like something as simple as I'm having an administrative dispute with my university. I was able to think critically, to respond out of to respond rationally and logically rather than responding out of emotion, because I was so used to presenting in front of judges in a fake court that I was really able to articulate what I was saying in a positive way instead of, just getting angry and frustrated. And I just think in general, like I went from being scared of speaking in front of like two people. I started mooting. The nerves were really awful. Like I had full-blown panic attacks when I started mooting because I was genuinely just so anxious. And now I speak in front of 2,000 people and I don't have a problem. So mooting has definitely changed my life, personally and in my career.
I'm happy to answer next. Definitely, when I first started university, I started doing mock trial. And so I did mock trial for around 3 years. And when I actually started mooting, it was by accident. I was just having a great day. As I said, it was Lions Cup. So Lions Cup runs around June. I was having a great day. You know, it's summertime. I'm hanging out. And one of my mock trial friends messaged me and it said, hey, would you like to do mooting? And at first I thought maybe spelled like mock trial wrong. So I'm like, yeah, sure. Like sign me up. And then he's like, no, this is mooting. This is different. And I'm like, what's the difference? He's like, okay, you'll see. And he said this like literally 48 hours before the moot. So we get together, we put stuff together, whatever. And I go into my first ever moot and I'm presenting like it's a mock trial. You know, I'm reading my script because I'm not really sure what's going on. And I get interrupted by a judge and I'm really confused. And I'm saying, hey, why are you interrupting me? In my mind, I'm wondering why he's interrupting me. And he starts asking me questions that I can't really answer, but I kind of figure my way out. And after the round, I asked my friend, I'm like, what did I get myself into? And he's like, yeah, this is mooting. And so from there, I really fell in love with it. And I will say the reason why I fell in love with it is that no other activity at the undergrad level allows you to engage with both the law and legal practitioners on such a level. All right, we currently live in a climate and a world in which your ability to advocate for yourself is so critical, right? Your ability to voice your opinions and where you stand is so important. And I honestly will stand by the statement that there's no other activity in undergrad and perhaps even in law school that allows you to refine your oral advocacy skills to this level. I love mock trial, but when you come to moot, you know you have to be prepared because oftentimes you will have lawyers that have arbitrated and adjudicated these cases, and they will sit there and they will push you to your limits. And oftentimes, like Cassandra said, sometimes you will stand there and you will think that I don't know the answers to this, but I promise when you actually put in the work and you do the research, you're going to look back 3, 6 months later and you're going to realize that you've come so much further than you ever thought possible. And it's the benefits. I've been telling people about mooting for 3 years now. There's not been a single person that I've introduced to mooting that's ever regretted it. Even if they've only done it once, they've always said, I'm so grateful that I did mooting. So absolutely, I would encourage each and every person, there's something for you to learn in mooting.
And I think just to even add on to that, like you kind of like no one who is not invested in their career is going to put themselves through the pain of a moot competition. Like no student is going to sit there and read 90 pages of a case for fun and compete for fun and get anxiety for fun and do all of those things. So I think when you get into mooting, you're really meeting a community who you know are very hardworking individuals. You know they're there to network and to meet people and to excel in their personal or in their careers. So we have another question. As a first year uni student with no mooting experience, how can I start and involve myself in mooting?
Hey, if I can take that question. So I'm a fourth year law and society student. So honestly, like you're doing it right now. You're involving yourself already in the community. And I would say that sometimes moving is can be from afar a little bit hard to get into. I mean, I haven't really been involved in the moving community until this year. And once you're in, like you're in, you see the people, like I said, the community that surrounds it. It's a almost like a pulling force that just pulls you into this community. And just by showing up to workshops like this and by keeping your eyes on different events and different things that are going on, you know, every university you can think of in the GTA, I would say, has their own variation of a mooting competition. So just start by looking there. York had, we're here, Lions Cup, U of T has one, uh, University of Guelph has one, I believe. So there's a variety that is just there for you to discover. So yeah, and it's never too late or too early to moot. There are first time mooters that are in their fourth year and their third year. There are, mooters that have started from first year. So it's really a really, really beautiful community, and it can give you so much, as much as it is a demanding thing, it's also a rewarding thing.
Our next question is, for students, is it difficult to prep for a moot competition while balancing academic work? I'll just give a little brief comment. So I personally think it's difficult, but that is also because I'm juggling being a full-time mom to two kids, full-time school, all of my extracurricular activities, and then also working as well here and there. But I really stress the importance of time management and a Google or app, some sort of calendar, whatever you prefer to use, to really help you manage your time.
And to add on to that, although it is kind of complicated at first to grasp, with your academic commitments and mooting, I think it's actually a good teaching experience to kind of you're able to understand what are your limits, what are you capable of, and you're also I used to think of mooting and then school as two different things. And then you start, if you're in a law program or a similar something that where you hear the cases that you've mooted before or the principles. So you're actively learning. So you're actually studying before you need to study. But I think it's just setting up a schedule that works for you. And I sometimes, give preference to moot work. Other than academic work, because it's just more exciting. But at the same time, you're learning because you're going to hear those principles later. You're going to, use the experience that you're getting now later. But it's a good testing ground to see how you're able to organize yourself.
Okay, so the next question is mooting, okay, I'll So yeah, is mooting only to current students? I honestly believe this is very competition based. When you get involved in mooting, you will start to see that different competitions run things differently. As it stands currently, our competition is you must have graduated within the last year in order to compete at our competition, and you cannot be a lawyer that a certified lawyer in any other state or province or in Canada. However, if you do feel like this is something that is inequitable or things should be changed, we are really looking to revise a lot of the typical moot standards. We're really trying to revamp, I'd say. So if you guys have any questions or concerns or anything that you think we should be doing in moot competitions, I really encourage you to send us an email so we can address that and hopefully make the competition better for everybody. Does someone want to answer the next question? Oh, any.
Yeah, so I'll tackle that. The question is, when justices begin to ask you questions during your submissions, what types of questions do they ask? How can you anticipate questions while you are practicing? So I'll break that down into two. The first part, what kind of questions do they ask? These questions can range over a variety of things. For example, a question could be asking you what the case you're citing to support your argument is. If you cite a case, they might ask you, what are the facts of that case? And the purpose of that is to make sure that you've actually done the research, right? To make sure that when you're presenting a case that the court has decided in the past as a case that supports your current position, justices want to know that you've read this case and you're certain that it supports your position. Because in real court, the judge doesn't want to go back, read your brief, and say, hey, you cited this case, but you only read paragraph 20. And in paragraph 200, when they actually decided the case, they said that what they said in paragraph 20 is wrong and they overturned it, right? So justices are going to ask you what we call clarification questions to make sure that you've actually done your research. Another type of question they might ask you is just questions to clarify if they don't understand something that you've presented. Or they might ask you, my favorite one is hypothetical questions. And a lot of mooters don't like hypothetical questions because they can quickly spiral out of control. But the purpose of hypothetical questions is also deeply rooted in the law. You have to remember that though the law is very interesting in that it has a dual nature, I guess you could say, and sometimes they stand in conflict and tension. The fact when we stand before a judge and we're appealing or adjudicating a case, we're adjudicating that specific case, right? We're looking at the facts of the case and how the law should apply in this case. However, the standing and the ruling in this case also serves as precedent for future cases because we live in a common law society here in Canada. So when judges make their decisions, they're not making it in a vacuum, right? They're making it in context of other prior decisions and also with the understanding that this will provide guidance for future decisions. And so when judges can ask you hypothetical questions to say, hey, the facts are X, Y, and Z in this case, but what happens if the facts are changed and it's, DEF in another case? Does your argument fail? Right. And they're looking for arguments that are substantial enough to the facts of this case, but also arguments that are, in a sense, flexible to accommodate future cases. So those are just two types of main questions that you'll see. And I'll go to the second part, which is like, how do you anticipate and how do you practice it? One of the best things that I would encourage you to do, and I know not everybody has the privilege of this, is if possible, I want you to moot and practice with a group of people, form a community. Because one of the things that I've really appreciated is recognizing that no matter how good you are at mooting, there will be some questions that you will never think of, generally. Every single person sees and understands the law in a different way. And so the more people you present before, the more people ask you questions, the more chances are that you're practicing with questions that might come up on the real day. So practice as much as you can with as many people as you can. And finally, recognize that no matter how much you practice, there will still be questions that you can't anticipate. And part of being a good oral advocate is being prepared to answer any question that comes your way, no matter what. And if you can't fully understand and answer the question at that time, your job is to make sure that you still give the best possible answer. It may not be the best answer overall, but it's the best possible answer that you can give, depending on your understanding of the case. So I hope that makes sense.
And the next question, I believe, is so that's been answered. That's been answered. Jennifer Miller says, let's say you've just finished reading the case. What are your next steps to start preparing submissions? How do you organize your notes? Does anyone want to take this?
I can take this one. So I think it differs for everyone. What's interesting about mooting, and like Innie said, mooting with a group of people and getting to know each other's kind of like moot practices is everyone has a different style. So I'm a very kind of like auditory, like verbal learning person. So once I finish reading the case, I kind of close all the material and I try to explain it to myself. And I usually separate the appellant and respondent, and I try to fully dive into one side first instead of trying to draft my submissions for both sides, because that can confuse you a little bit because you have to go in 100% for one side and then 100% for the other. So also regarding materials, a lot of competitions do let you use factums and a lot of competitions don't. But what I find really helpful is reading the factums, even if you can't cite them later in your submissions, because that will give you even more material to choose from, or to understand the case through. But what I usually do is I explain it to myself without my written submission, and I try to make sense of what I'm saying. And then once I kind of have a skeleton or an outline of what I want to say, I write it down and then I sprinkle case law and everything to kind of buttress my point. But other than that, I think everyone has their different styles. If anyone wants to add their different style. And as to preparation, I find really helpful to record myself after I have finished my submissions and I listen to myself talking. I make my friends go through the excruciating experience of hearing me moot, and I ask them to ask me questions. And sometimes, as Innie was saying, sometimes you'll be mooting with mooters. So they will have read the case, they understand the case. But sometimes your friends and family that have no idea what the case is about are the best people that will ask you the most outlandish question that will make you think way more about the case than an informed question. So there are many different ways. You have to find out what works for you. And watching videos really helps. Previous Moot videos, previous Lions Cup videos, and because you see finalists and winners mooting. So they have the hang of it better than anyone. And it's really inspiring to see that too. So that's it for me.
And I think as well, just to add on to that, what I usually do is I like to create kind of a chart that has the dissent and the majority, because sometimes you're going to get really confused on what each side is arguing. So you could have the dissent, you could have the majority, and you could have the concurring. Justice Cote is usually always on the concurring. She writes her own decisions typically. You'll notice that in a lot of Supreme Court of Canada cases. And her reasoning a lot of the time is very, very difficult to understand. And I find I spend more time on the concurring decision rather than the majority and the dissent. But create that visual chart. And like I have like the big teacher's paper at my house and like dissent says XYZ, majority says XYZ, and concurring and so on. And then from there, you can start to piece together what each side is arguing and what they're saying. And that visual aspect of it really helps you understand the case so that you're able to draft your submissions. And for me myself, like I typically don't draft my submissions until maybe like a week before the actual competition, because that 3 weeks that the case is released, you want to really focus on understanding the case, the materials, telling your friends and family about it. And then afterwards, you can draft your submissions when you know you have like a concrete understanding.
Yeah, I want to quickly touch on this before we move on. What Maria just mentioned is such a hidden gem. And now that I'm done undergrad mooting, I really want to emphasize for all of you. I learned about this pretty much at my last competition when one of my friends in talking just said, hey, I actually record myself. I moot, and my mind was blown. And so the way I understand mooting is there are two tiers to mooting, right? When you first start, you need to understand what mooting is focus on understanding the case, the arguments, right? I would say maybe your first two moots. And then when you start enjoying moot, right? This is the fun part. You kind of move to the second tier. Not only are you presenting, you want to perfect your craft. That's how I think about it. I love moot. So you're not just going there to present arguments, but I want you to think about it like you want to perfect a craft. And so when you listen to yourself moot, you notice the little things. You notice your tone inflections. You notice your intonations, your enunciations, right? Do you pause enough when you answer a question? And if you don't pause enough, oftentimes you'll realize that you get lost. Going back to the question I answered, you get lost in your speech. Listening to yourself moot for 7 minutes is honestly going to help you reap enormous benefits, right? Because as painful as it is, and Maria, I know I really don't like listening to myself as well. I've never watched any round I've competed in. I don't care if it's recorded, I'm never watching it. I'm never watching it again. But when you force yourself to do it, it really just teaches you the things that you won't realize while you're mooting. So I just really wanted to emphasize that. And moving on to the question that I already kind of answered. So the question was, when replying to judges' questions, it might be awkward to say the appellant or respondent submits every time, or any of phrases such as we submit, it's our submission, we think, we believe acceptable as well. And as I've said in the chat, you can use substitute phrases such as it is our submission, it is our position, we submit. I would note two things. In Canada, we don't use the word argue, just because it's like niceties, like, we don't argue in Canada, we make submissions, so we call them oral submissions, not oral arguments. When you go down south to America, they will use the word argue. And so when I've competed in America before, when I kept saying we submit, the judges were like, what you mean we argue? Like, you're arguing before the court. And I was like, oh, my bad, I forgot I'm in America now, we're arguing before the court. But in Canada, we make submissions, we don't argue. And I would also really stay away from phrases like we think, we believe. Judges want to know what your position is, not what you think or believe. And I'm saying this, it might sound a bit harsh, but this is what judges have told me to my face. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you believe. I want to know what your position is. Because when a judge is going to make a ruling and write it down, and they're going to be accountable for that ruling for the next, let's say, 10, 20 years, they want to make sure that they are basing their decision on facts and reasoning, not emotions and beliefs, right? So that's why we stay away from that position. When you're making your submissions, you're telling the court what your position is, what your submission is, not what your hope, belief, or anticipation is.
And I don't think there are any other questions in the chat, but if you guys have any more, please feel free to ask. If there are no more questions, this I think concludes most of our presentation. You are free to go if you don't have any questions. Just another reminder, if you came in late, this was recorded, and it will be posted on our social media and everything for viewing. So if you need access to it or anything, you can find it on our YouTube channel. I will send a follow-up email to everybody with the link. But if you don't have any questions, we do really appreciate you attending. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up, and more, I think, in-person events as well. I know virtual is very accessible to everybody, but our goal is to kind of have a mix of in-person, online, and most of our events will be free as well. So don't be alarmed or anything if you can't ever access any of our workshops. And then our competition as well. Our goal this year is to decrease the competition fees and really focus on making things financially accessible to everybody. So when we announce our competition dates and everything, if you ever feel like you're having financial issues or anything, please send us an email and we will do our absolute best to accommodate everyone. But I genuinely hope we see all of you guys at our future workshops and at our competition, because I think that this is probably going to be the best one that we've ever had. We have so much planned, so we really appreciate it.
Sorry, I think we have one more question in the chat. Would it be okay to say that as our friends have argued while countering opposing counsel's position, or should one also say as our friends submit? So it's always a submission, and it's always your opposing party are your friends. So avoiding terms like opposing, argued, that's just common moot practice that you will get used to. At this point, sometimes I even forget the word argue exists because I police myself so much in my head to not say it. And in other contexts, that's going to become difficult because you will be so used to saying submissions. So you should always refer to them as submissions in the mooting context.
I guess I can ask a question for people who are in the chat. Are people generally interested in, are people looking forward to signing up for Lions Cup this year? Are people just testing the waters? Or are there people who are like, I know 100% I'm going to sign up?
Yeah, and does anyone have any suggestions for what you guys want to see? Like, what do you want to see from kind of us, the Moot community, with respect to workshops, events, or even the competition itself? And do we work with decided cases or not decided cases yet? So specifically for Lions Cup, we always choose a Supreme Court of Canada case. We don't make up a case. We don't typically do Court of Appeal cases. The only time I would say that we actually do like a Court of Appeal case is if all of the cases that went to the Supreme Court of Canada are not the greatest and not moot worthy. Then we kind of either choose an older case or we'll have to go down to the Court of Appeal. However, I don't anticipate that being an issue this year because the Supreme Court seemed to release a lot of decisions over the last few months. So I'm pretty sure we'll have a great case to work with this year. All right, so that concludes. I will stop the recording now. So thank you everybody for attending.